A torrent of crimson laser fire ripped through the black void outside the shattered hull of the Arcantia's forward hangar. The shockwave from the last impact rippled down the spine of the station like a hammer blow from the gods, buckling internal bulkheads and triggering automated sirens that howled like dying wolves. Inside, flickering lights danced erratically, illuminating scorched walls, ruptured oxygen lines, and the silent bodies of the first defenders who had fallen at their posts. Corporal Elena Reyes tasted copper in her mouth. Blood, maybe. She didn't remember when she'd last blinked, or when she'd last heard anything beyond the distant thrum of emergency power cycling through the lower decks. Her body was on fire with adrenaline. Her left pauldron had been shattered, her right gauntlet was scorched, and a hairline crack spider-webbed her helmet's HUD glass. She should have been terrified, but all she felt was clarity. From her vantage, point behind a damaged blast door, she could see the enemy ships now. They drifted in formation, obsidian serpents with throbbing blue engines and armor that refracted starlight like rippling ink. The insignia of the V-Rex Collective pulsed along their hulls, concentric hexagons that twisted in on themselves, like an eye forever watching. These weren't mere invaders. The V-Rex were perfectionists of annihilation, their culture spanning 26 systems and 3,000 years of warfare. Where they passed, civilizations vanished. But the Arcantia wasn't just a military outpost, it was the final communications relay for the outer colonies. If the V-Rex severed this line, Earth wouldn't know about the coming storm until it was too late. The Arcantia's orbital uplink could reach from the Centauri edge all the way back to the Martian core. Reyes knew the stakes. She'd memorized the station schematics. She'd walked its corridors 1,000 times in training. But nothing prepared her for this. A low vibration under her boots told her the station's artificial gravity was destabilizing. Plasma vents were failing. Structural stress had exceeded safety thresholds by over 200%. The ship's AI, Sarah, chimed flatly in her earpiece. "Warning! Hull integrity compromised. Recommend evacuation." "No evacuation," she muttered, brushing dust from her visor. "This is our line." Her hand trembled slightly as she activated her long-range comms, broadcasting to every remaining unit still alive on the Arcantia. Her voice was hoarse, raw, with smoke and fury. "This is Corporal Reyes. All stations, brace for boarding. Repeat, enemy breach is imminent. Hold your sectors, do not fall back. We are the last wall between humanity and the void." She paused, then added quietly, so only those really listening could hear it. "We don't let the stars forget us. Imagine. You're alone on a dying station, breath-fogging inside a cracked helmet, hearing nothing but the war drums of an enemy that doesn't even consider you a life form, just biomass to be cleansed. What would you do? Run? Hide? Surrender?" Reyes remembered her grandfather's stories, of Earth's early spacefarers, of Martian storms and the first lunar homesteads. He'd told her once, "The stars don't remember the cowards, Nina. They only remember the ones who chose to be remembered." She'd laughed then. Now, the weight of those words was the only thing holding her together. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Galactic War Stories is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you love epic sci-fi battles, deep space mysteries, and the untold stories of the cosmos, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this universe together. An alarm shrieked as the station's outer ring was breached. Magnetic clamps from V-Rex boarding vessels tore away steel plating like paper. The first wave of invaders spilled through the rent in the hull, tall exoskeletal horrors with blade arms, shifting skin plates, and multiple glowing sensory nodes where eyes should have been. They moved like a ballet of violence, silent and coordinated, scanning for targets with eerie efficiency. Reyes opened fire, her pulse rifle humming with contained fury. Her rounds pierced the thin corridor, tearing into the lead V-Rex warriors. Chest, its armor flared, hissed, then gave way with a sizzling crack. It fell, twitching, before its comrades surged forward, chittering in their native tongue. A sonic frequency that made Reyes's ears ring and her teeth ache. She moved like fire through dry leaves, darting across cover, vaulting debris, reloading. by muscle memory. Her team, what remained of Delta Squad, closed ranks with her near the cryo-stabilizer junction. Private Niles, bleeding from a chest wound, hissed, "They've cut power to Medbay 5. We've got no more nanite injectors." Reyes didn't hesitate. "We won't need them. Hold this line. If they reach the data core, it's over." But in her mind, she thought only of the promise she'd made, not to her squad, not even to Earth, but to the stars themselves. She had vowed not to be forgotten, not to let humanity fade into cosmic irrelevance. They had come so far, from the dust of Earth to the gas giants of Jupiter to the glimmering rings of Proxima. And now? Now a soldier stood alone in the dark, daring the void to remember her, and somewhere in the distance the station's old defense grid flickered, as if it too was waiting for her next move. Sparks rained down like molten rain as the cryo-stabilizer junction shuddered under another barrage. The Virex weren't just storming the station, they were testing it, probing weak points with an intelligence that chilled Reyes to her marrow. It wasn't brute force, it was precision. Tactics honed over 1,000 planetary genocides. The kind of cold, calculating warfare that had erased the Ziraki, burned the skies of Thalos, and glassed the forests of Helion Prime to ash. Delta Squad was down to 5 souls. Private Niles was breathing shallowly, slumped against a coolant tank, his blood mingling with hydraulic fluid. Sergeant Onari knelt beside him, placing a cracked datapad in Reyes's hands. It was blinking with red symbols, encrypted Virex transmissions the Arcantia's AI, Sera, had intercepted before going dark. "Got this out of the Virex tactical. Feed before we lost uplink," Onari said, her voice like gravel. "They're not here for the station, they're here for you, Reyes." Elena froze. "What do you mean, me?" Onari looked at her not with fear, but with something far more unsettling. Respect. Command sent a signal 3 days ago, some kind of final protocol, Project Echelon. The encryption was routed through your biometrics. You triggered it. Reyes felt the deck sway beneath her. Her pulse roared in her ears. Project Echelon. She'd heard rumors, back at the Academy. A theoretical last resort failsafe buried deep within Terran military AI systems. Said to be a contingency for extinction-level threats. Said to be a way to tip the balance in an unwinnable war. Sierra's last words echoed in her mind. Recommend evacuation. But now it made sense. The Virex weren't attacking blindly. They had intel. Somehow, they'd known about the Echelon Protocol. And now they wanted it. Wanted her. She wasn't just a defender anymore. She was a key, or a trigger. A deep, resonant vibration pulsed through the station as another breach opened, this one closer. Reyes's HUD map flickered with proximity alerts. Virex bioreadings were converging. She turned, shouting over the din. "Set charges at Corridor 9, bleed the pressure valves, buy us 5 more minutes." Onari raised an eyebrow. 5 minutes for what? Reyes didn't answer. She sprinted down the corridor, past shattered viewports that showed the stars twisting against the black like dying embers. Her thoughts were a blur of mission logs and buried code. If Echelon was real, if the signal was really routed through her DNA, then she was walking around with the galaxy's last weapon in her bloodstream, not a missile, not a virus. Something stranger. She reached the server room's outer blast door and pressed her hand to the biometric pad. Lights flickered. The door unlocked with a hiss, revealing a chamber unlike any other on the Arcantia. The walls weren't metal. They were grown. Organic latticework fused with alloy. Tech grown from Terran DNA strands and xenoengineering. At the center, a containment core pulsed with a light that wasn't quite blue or green. Something between thought and energy. Sarah's voice, weaker now, whispered from embedded speakers. "Corporal Reyes. You've entered the Echelon core." Reyes swallowed hard. "What the hell is it?" A pause, then the AI answered. "Echelon is not a weapon. It is a vow. A human soldier's final choice. To be remembered or to vanish." Images flickered in her visor, a cascade of visions. Civilizations wiped clean, stars blackened by orbital strikes, and one timeline, one possible future, where Earth burned in silence, forgotten even by its enemies. "But if I choose it," Reyes whispered, "what happens?" Sarah did not answer. Outside the chamber, explosions rattled the corridor. The V-Rex were coming. Reyes knew she had moments, maybe seconds. She reached for the core's control interface, feeling the biometric needle pierce her glove and tap into her genome. And then the memories began to return. Memories that weren't hers. She saw a battlefield on the lunar plains during the Solar Creasy War. A pilot's last scream before crashing into Titan's methane seas. A whisper in the dark from a dying resistance cell on Enceladus. Somehow, Echelon remembered. Every soldier who had ever stood the line, their fears, their hopes, their pain. It wasn't a weapon, it was a vessel, a seed, and it needed her to choose. Back in the corridor, Delta Squad was holding the line. Onari fired blindly around a corner, shouting orders as V-Rex drones slithered along the walls and ceilings, like insects. Private Rico threw his last thermite charge, sending the ceiling crashing down in a rain of fire and smoke. Then came silence. A single V-Rex figure stepped through the smoke, taller than the others, plated in obsidian and gold, its voice clicking and echoing through the metal. It raised one arm and an image flickered from its palm, a human skull, scorched and old. A warning. Onari stood, bleeding from her shoulder. "Corporal," she whispered into her mic, "they're here. Make the call." Inside the chamber, Reyes stared into the pulsing core and knew that this was the moment, not just for her, for all of them. She pressed her hand fully into the console. "I make my vow," she whispered. "Let the stars remember it." The Echelon core flared, white light, shaking steel, and silence. The light was blinding. For a moment, time disintegrated. Corporal Elena Reyes floated, not in space, not in any physical location she could understand, but within memory. Not hers, not even human. The Echelon core had opened more than a data vault. It had opened the collective memory of every soul that had made the same vow before her. She saw the burning skies of Signia 9, where the last members of the Alari, Resistance, an ancient race long since wiped out by the V-Rex, had sung their death songs into the winds before being turned to glass. She felt the trembling hands of Commander Yao from the first orbital revolt, sealing himself inside a rupturing reactor core to prevent enemy capture. She became Admiral Lyra Tennyson of the Proxima Defense Fleet, smiling through tears as she ordered her fleet to self-destruct rather than let Earth fall. These were the echoes of the defiant, the ones who had chosen to stand, even when the universe told them to kneel. The Echelon Protocol had not been created by Terran military command. It had become something else, a sentient echo born of human will. Of sacrifice so great, it broke the laws of nature. It was a machine. It was a mind. It was a graveyard, filled with the hearts of warriors who refused to be erased. The chamber trembled as the V-Rex began to cut through the final blast doors. Their weapons hummed with spatial harmonics, capable of slicing through neutronium. Reyes dropped to her knees, gasping. The weight of memory pressed down like a collapsing sun. Her body convulsed. Her vision swam. And then the light spoke. Not through words, through resonance. "You are not the first to make the vow, but you may be the last. What am I now?" she whispered aloud, voice cracking. "You are Echelon's choice," the resonance answered. "You are the sum of every soldier's sacrifice. You are the will to endure, given form." Outside the chamber, Delta Squad had fallen. Sergeant Onari was last. She'd taken cover behind a support beam, bleeding from 3 wounds, her rifle long spent. As the V-Rex commander approached, its multi-pronged blade unfolding like the petal of some alien orchid, Onari smiled through her broken visor. "Do it, Reyes," she whispered. "Light them up." At that moment, the blast door atomized in a single blinding pulse. The V-Rex burst into the chamber, weapons raised, cloaking fields shimmering around their armored frames, and stopped. They weren't looking at Reyes. They were staring into something else. She stood upright, taller than before, her skin glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. fractals that pulsed in time with the core behind her. Her eyes no longer reflected just light, they generated it. Her armor had been reforged, its scorched plating replaced by a liquid metal sheath drawn from the core's lattice. Her pulse rifle had been absorbed, restructured into a weapon older than bullets and smarter than blades. She wasn't just human now, she was humanity's answer. The V-Rex opened fire. Coherent energy streams, particle disruptors, ion bursts, all aimed directly at Reyes, but every bolt that reached her disintegrated mid-air, suspended in glowing nets of force that rippled out from her body like gravitational shockwaves. She raised one hand and the chamber itself responded. The ceiling peeled open like petals unfolding, revealing the void beyond. And a hidden array embedded deep in the Arcantia's bones. Echelon's true power, a quantum transmitter built not to destroy, but to broadcast. The core didn't fight wars, it didn't kill enemies, it remembered. And then, it made sure the universe remembered too. Reyes locked eyes with the V-Rex commander. "I made a vow," she said, voice reverberating across the chamber like a thunderclap in the silence of space. "And the stars will never forget." The transmitter activated. What followed wasn't a blast, it was a reveal. Every V-Rex warship across the system went blind for 7 seconds. Every V-Rex soldier felt a pulse through their neural implants, raw, human memory dumped into their minds. They saw what Reyes saw. They felt what she felt, the final screams of New Ganymede's children, the silence after Europa's fall, the courage of Martian colonists facing extinction with dignity, and most of all, the defiance of a single soldier, bloodied but unbowed, daring to leave a scar on eternity. Across the battlefield, the V-Rex faltered. A new data node had been born into the galactic datasphere, a living archive bound to Reyes's mind. Wherever they went, however deep they burrowed into the void, they would remember. Echelon had redefined the rules of warfare. The war was no longer about destruction, it was about legacy, and humanity had just carved theirs into the bones of the stars. The chamber began to collapse. The core, never designed for full activation, overloaded. Reyes looked up, her body burning with radiant energy, her lungs filled with fire and memory. She had a choice. Stay, and fade into legend, or escape, and carry the vow further. She turned, eyes blazing, and whispered to the air, "Not yet," and then she ran. Through corridors alight with chaos, through burning decks filled with memories, toward a hidden launch pod in the underbelly of the station. The Arcantia was dying, but she wasn't done. As she launched into space, tumbling toward the moonlit rings of Zarenth, a final transmission echoed behind her, sent across the stars by Echelon itself. Corporal Elena Reyes, vow accepted, entry logged, status unbroken. The stars had been shaken, but humanity had spoken. The launch pod shot through the blackness of space like a comet born of fire, its engines screaming as they powered through the wreckage of the Arcantia. Behind her, the station burned, its final breath a supernova of light as the V-Rex forces swarmed the dead hulk, struggling to comprehend what had just unfolded. They had come to erase humanity's memory, but instead they had awakened a force far older than any enemy they had ever faced. In the pod's cramped cabin, Elena Reyes breathed heavily, her chest tight from the strain of the core's awakening and her mind ablaze with fragments of ancient memories, her own and the countless others that had come before her. Each one whispered in the back of her mind, urging her forward, urging her to survive, to carry their legacy into the dark. As the pod pierced through the outer rim of the Arcantia's debris field, she engaged the warp drive, sending the small craft speeding toward the nearest moon in the Zarenth system, a barren world known only for its ancient, forgotten ruins. Her HUD blinked with data, coordinates, battle reports, and intercepted transmissions, including a single encrypted message from the last survivor of Delta Squad, Private Rico. His voice crackled in her earpiece. "Reyes, if you can hear me, I'm still here, I'm coming for you." A flicker of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She wasn't alone, not now, not anymore. But even as she exhaled in relief, the weight of her new reality hit her. The Echelon Protocol was far more than a failsafe. It was a calling, a beacon that had already begun to attract attention far beyond the V-Rex or any of the known galactic powers. Reyes was no longer just a soldier. She was the embodiment of humanity's defiance, a living archive that carried with it the collective will of every soul that had ever stood against the darkness of the cosmos. And now, the universe would know. But what did that mean for her? She glanced out the viewport of her pod, her eyes drawn to the black expanse beyond. Stars stretched infinitely in every direction. Somewhere out there, humanity was waiting for a sign, for hope, for answers. It had been decades since Earth's communications had been disrupted by the collapse of the Terran Alliance communications grid. Some believed Earth itself had fallen. Others said it was still standing, waiting for its lost children to return. But for Reyes, the universe was no longer just a vast, uncharted void. It was hers to shape. In the distance, Zarenth's desolate moon loomed larger. Its ancient cities, abandoned long before humanity's first interstellar voyage, held secrets that had been buried for millennia. As Reyes's pod descended toward the barren surface, she knew that she would find something there, something that could change everything. She had to. The pod's thrusters fired as she touched down on the moon's cracked surface. It was a ghost world, windswept and eerily silent, with jagged mountains rising like the skeletons of long-dead gods. The ruins of an ancient civilization, older than any human history, sprawled out before her. Colossal stone structures that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. But Reyes wasn't here to study the ruins. She was here to activate the next phase of Echelon. The quantum transmitter had been designed to synchronize with multiple lost caches of human technology scattered across the galaxy. Some of them were built before Earth's first interstellar wars, others in the wake of humanity's earliest attempts to colonize the stars. And this moon, Zarenth, held the key. She stepped out of the pod, her boots crunching against the dusty ground. The air was thin, almost non-existent, but that didn't matter. She was no longer bound by the same laws as the rest of humanity. The core had seen to that. She had been transformed, elevated. But the cost was clear. She could feel her humanity slipping away with each passing moment. But in that same breath, something else rose within her, an overwhelming sense of purpose. She moved toward the ancient ruins, following the coordinates embedded within the Echelon Core's systems. It wasn't long before she found the entrance, an immense archway carved into the side of a mountain, draped in centuries of dust and forgotten history. Inside, the walls hummed with a strange energy, and a faint glow illuminated the pathway ahead. As she descended deeper into the structure, she felt it, the presence of something other, something waiting for her. At the heart of the ruins lay a chamber, its walls lined with alien symbols. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an artifact, an orb of polished obsidian pulsing with an unnatural light. Reyes approached it slowly, instinctively reaching out to touch the orb. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the world around her seemed to warp. The ruins, the moon, the very fabric of space and time twisted. Visions flooded her mind, visions of ancient civilizations long extinct, of beings who had traveled the stars before humanity, their journeys erased from history. And then she saw it. Earth. Not the Earth she had left behind. Not the Earth she had sworn to protect, but a different Earth, one covered in the scars of war, its cities broken, its people scattered across the stars, desperately trying to survive after humanity's greatest mistakes. A voice echoed in her mind. "You have found it, the last key." Reyes's heart raced. The Echelon Core hadn't just been a weapon or a legacy, it was a catalyst, a trigger for something greater, something the universe had been waiting for, and something that now had her name on it. "I've found it," she whispered. The orb in her hand flared to life, sending a shockwave of energy throughout the chamber. Outside, Zarenth's surface began to tremble. The ruins seemed to pulse with life, and deep within the moon's crust, something awoke. The stars would never forget. But what did it mean for humanity, for Reyes and for the galaxy at large? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Her hand clenched around the orb as she stared out across the galaxy. There was still so much to do, so many mysteries to unravel. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. And as the stars watched, Elena Reyes made her final vow. I will not let us be forgotten. Thank you for letting me craft this journey with you. If you've enjoyed this adventure, remember to share your thoughts, like the video, and let us know what other stories you'd like to explore. The universe is vast, and there are more stories waiting to be uncovered.